The largest tomb on Earth isn't in Egypt or China, it's in Japan, and it's called KOFUN. This massive stone structure stretches for over 1600 feet long and 1000 feet wide. It's longer than 5 football fields. It's bigger than the entire Vatican City. It's so large it could potentially hold enough artifacts to answer some of archaeology's biggest mysteries. Yet, excavation is completely prohibited, and nobody has ever unsealed the biggest of these tombs. Looking at their size, you might think there are just a handful of these ancient structures in Japan. But in reality, there are over 160,000 kofuns across Japan. You heard that right, 160,000 of these. Japan is an island, where land is incredibly precious. You've probably seen how tiny their apartments can be. So how do they have space for 160,000 of these massive stone structures? Who built them and why? If we accept the theory that kofuns are tombs, this makes Japan the only country in the world with more tombs than convenience stores. There are only about 50,000 convenience stores in Japan, but there are 3 times more kofuns. Think about that for a second. Why would Japan have more tombs than stores? My theory? These structures aren't tombs at all. They're something else entirely. The Japanese government has gone to extraordinary lengths not just to prohibit excavation or study of the kofuns. They've also surrounded them with fences and water. Of the 161,150 documented kofuns, only around 100 have been explored so far and can be accessed. The remaining 161,000 are completely off limits. They've either been sealed or actively guarded right now. There's even a specific organization, the Imperial Household Agency, which is dedicated to ensuring nobody can access these kofuns. The ones located in cities or near urban areas are surrounded by water to prevent access. They have fences, they have guards. The others are either kept secret or remain entirely underground. What's even stranger is how little these structures are covered in Japanese history classes. From my perspective, it's entirely possible that historical documents about kofuns were intentionally erased at some point. I'm not trying to build a massive conspiracy theory here, but as we know, history is written by the victors. And according to mainstream history, the building of the largest kofun took 2,000 workers 16 years of non-stop work. Supposedly this happened 1500 years ago.
古墳を作るというのは、昼は人が作って、夜は神が作った。
っていうものもあるので、中に何が入ってるのかわからない。
I have to say, I don't believe this explanation at all for several reasons. First, I carefully looked at the 100 kofuns that are accessible to the public. They're all built with large megalithic rocks that resemble Stone Age structures, not 5th century AD architecture. Let me put this in context. Here's what typical 5th century buildings in Japan actually looked like. The Makimuku ruins, massive wooden buildings. The Onaka ancient village, a wooden settlement from the 5th century. The famous Nishina Shinimei shrine, dating back to the 4th century. So how did people who built exclusively with wood suddenly decide to carve massive rocks, and not for their living spaces, but supposedly for their dead? There was no tradition of stone tombs back then. The kofun period appears to emerge out of nowhere in history books. I believe these ancient kofuns existed long before Japan as we know it. The stone structures are remnants of an ancient civilization, and we have no idea who built them or why. Some of these structures, like the Ishibutai tumulus, have carved channels, possibly for blood or water. Regardless of what flowed through these channels, they seem out of place in the tomb. I couldn't find a single tomb anywhere else in the world with similar water channels. Not to mention, some of these rocks weigh over 70 tons, as heavy as the stones in the Egyptian pyramids, sometimes even heavier. But luckily, we're not the first to ask these questions. The first person to study kofuns was William Gowland, an English gentleman often called the father of Japanese archaeology. In the early 1870s, Gowland became obsessed with kofuns and struggled to understand their purpose. In 1906, he published the burial mounds of the early emperors of Japan, theorizing these mounds contained emperor remains, though this was never proven. Gowland believed these KOFUNs were incredibly ancient. He wrote that they were monuments built by warrior elites who ruled Japan before written history had begun. Despite his assumption that these were tombs, and despite excavating several KOFUNs, Gowland never found any human bones or skeletons inside these tombs. Some argue that this is because Japan has an acidic soil, but come on, these people supposedly built complexes rivaling the Great Pyramids of Giza, yet they couldn't properly preserve a body? I looked long and hard to find a coffin related to the KOFUNs in Japan. The only coffin I found is a restoration. There are no pictures of the original coffin anywhere. It's this one, in the Shibutai megaliths. Interestingly, more of the explored KOFUNs contain star charts than coffins. One of the KOFUNs actually contains the oldest star chart in the world. And what gets my attention is this distinctive keyhole shape. A few years ago, after NASA released imagery from Mars, some conspiracy theorists spotted a similar shape on Mars. Although I'm not venturing that far in my theory, I'm not a fan of NASA images. I've thought long and hard about why an entire island would suddenly start building these massive structures with such similar designs, as if someone coordinated the whole thing across the entire island. If you set aside mainstream archaeology's claim that they are tombs, what do these structures look like to you? They are underground chambers with large stone walls and a single entrance. To me, they resemble bunkers. I'm not gonna go too deep into speculative territory, but I've investigated prehistoric bunkers before, and these KOFUNs share striking similarities, so let me know if you'd like to explore them together. I'm Xuisoko, thanks for watching. If these strange structures fascinated you, check out my episode on the prehistoric bunker in Afghanistan. I believe it existed before the Great Flood. See you in the next episode.